there's some ice cream in the kitchen. I saw it in the refrigerator. Like, I'm sure it's in there. Go see. Go see if there's some cookies and ice cream in there. Maybe there's some leftover something, something we like. And so when that happens, you know that you're being directed
Mm.
because sleep is not the time for eating.
Yeah, so these are telltale signs of being influenced. When I think this is an excellent example of those universal, and I'm sure people are listening to this like, "Oh man, she talking about me? She talking?" And I get it, and I've had moments like that.
You have to eat fermented foods. Every day you got to eat fermented foods because if you're not eating fermented foods, you're not doing your body a service. You're supposed to be eating fermented foods every day. You can actually ferment any vegetable you like. When I go home, I'll have a salad. I put a whole bunch of that fermented stuff in it. I'm getting all that bacteria inside me. So you want to eat dahi, you want to eat kefir if you don't like dahi, you want to eat sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. Kombucha is a nice fermented drink as well. Anything fermented. Fermented stuff is really good, except for the beer.
Welcome to Call for the Truth. I am Lois of the Sun, and this is Tavares of the Sun, and we are here today to engage you into a conversation about something that we all know about. We're going to be talking about entities and attachments. So, before we begin, Tavares, will you call for the truth and bring us all into the call for the truth?
Most certainly, and we encourage you all who are joining us in this Call for the Truth podcast to join us in the call for the frequency of truth. Shall we call forth the frequency of truth to come forward? Should we call to see the truth in all that we see? Shall we call to hear the truth in all that we hear? Shall we call to speak truth, calling forth the courage to speak the truth? Shall we call forth nothing less than the truth to come forth into our experience? And we are here in the truth. Those who want to continue with this call for the truth, hit that like, subscribe, that bell notification, ding, ding, ding. Also join us every Thursday for a live podcast with Louds of the Sun. And so we're here. We're talking about entity attachment and how to be free of these entities. Because people are like, I feel something on me, Lauta. Something just see people be like, oh, there's something over your shoulder. I think I saw something in the corner of my eye, or these energies that have attached to their field that's compelling different behaviors, people feeling like they're low on energy. Uh, let's hash this out. I think this is a great opportunity for us to demystify what it is and really ground people and how regularly this thing happens or these energies are around us. So, would you kick us off with explaining what is an entity?
So, the way that it's used commonly is multidimensional and can refer to many experiences in many different ways. What people are usually referring to is a predatory consciousness that is parasitic and is attempting to remove energy from them. That's the way people usually think of it. It's the idea of something trying to take away your life force. And it's, again, that's very multidimensional. We can speak of it as an interference pattern, which is how we often talk about it at Of the Sun, that there's an interference pattern coming in, which could be an argument from yesterday that has some conscious form and is attaching to the like resonant energy. So whenever two things meet, that's a frequency match. One is usually the giver and one is the receiver. So these dynamics exist in our experience on the third dimension and beyond. And often it's from our own exposure and or behavior, or even maybe what's in us, or what our ancestors did, or what we did in previous lifetimes that we don't remember. There's so many layers. This is a very wide range, but I think generally speaking, when people talk like that, they feel that they're being aggressed. and they can feel that something may have attached physically to their physical organism, which is in fact a reality. And I have felt it myself. And it is looking for a way to gain a foothold with them. So, in most cases, this really is a matter of mind control because everything is first a thought. And whether it's mind control in the current moment or mind control from a previous time, like a house may have uh, abusive kind of energy, and that abusive energy may also be predatory. And when you go to sleep, you may feel like you're being abused, and something may have attached to you when it is the morphic feel of the residence that you're in. It could also be in real time with talking to someone in your office who's turned up a bit and being aggressive, and you feel aggressed. It's still an interference pattern coming into your field. The bigger thing I think to realize is that you are the master of your reality, but we just don't know how many cracks and crevices and leaky uh, holes we have in our reality that things can get into, or what we're calling forth by our behavior. We do things that limit the body's ability to protect us, like drink hard alcohol, or we eat food that is damaging and turns us into acid, and we continue that process. If we have behavior where we're interfacing with frequencies that are not in the best and highest interest of human beings, when we are participating in things below on and lower consciousness levels, sadness, depression, shame, all of these things are open doorways.
So it's a very strong foundation. Okay, so you just gave us an extensive foundational understanding about entities, and I like how you were differentiating at the beginning. uh, the entities that people usually speak of is entities that have a parasitic type of behavior, because I understand entity can be a broad term.
Yes.
Think about a company. A company is considered an entity. Yeah. There are various interdimensional beings that are not necessarily operating parasitic, but they are classified as an entity. But again, we're talking about those that are parasitic. So would you speak a little bit more about the parasitic aspect of entities and this idea of how, just like parasites, they need people's life force or the perpetuation of the negative behavior in order to sustain themselves? Would you speak a little bit about?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, please elaborate. Take us deeper. Snorkeling gear is ready for aside.
I think that's a good place to start because we know that in on the earth plane at this time there are those things that by nature are parasitic, meaning they live off the life force of others. However, what we often don't take into account is that much of our government, much of our systems and constructs are modeled after that, where they exist off the life force of others. That's what slavery is. That's what um, how do churches exist except off the life force of the parishioners? How does government exist except off the life force of the citizens? So many of our constructs are structures that exist off the life force of other structures and not like the sun in the sky that is radiating self-induced power always and forever. So that's our example. That's one example that we can look at and say, well, the sun is not parasitic. However, many of our structures on Earth, much of what our ancestors have gone through, much of the many lifetimes we have been exposed to these systematic systems that cultivate and herd humans through this process of parasitic behavior, like um, war, go kill someone else and bring me back what's left over. That's parasitic. Go conquer someone else's land and then move in and use the resources to sustain yourself off the backs of the ones who were there first. So there's that.
This is major. because it expands our perception and our awareness of what an entity is in its many different forms. This has taken us from not just internal parasites, not just spiritual entity parasites and attachments, but people, systems, ideas that exist outside of us that are literally parasitic, literally usurping the life force, and all of their behavior shows and indicates such. I think this is major, and it brings to mind, okay, how do people free themselves, and is the freeing of oneself is the solution the same on every level? You know, because we're talking about several levels of entity attachment that we have in some shape or form agreed to.
The details are different. The foundational, it's only the details. So one of the things that I notice because of the business that I am in, of looking at people's behaviors and their disposition, I notice that most people are inundated with physical parasites, inundated with all levels. I recently just spoke to someone in Mexico City who called me because she had picked up a parasite, and we determined it was from the water. And so I encouraged her not to continue to engage with the water that she was engaging with. But previously, she had been in Mexico City and picked up an intestinal parasite, which she had called me about a year or so ago. And so it was in the meat in that she was eating in the restaurants. So these are very real understandings. When my children were growing up, I was giving them something to help them clear parasites 2 or 3 times a year because they were touching everything and doing everything and not knowing not to. And they had cooties. And so we generally, humanity has cooties. Then one think of it, and if we have them internally, we probably have them if we have them in our guts and in our body and in our physical mechanisms, then we probably have them in our field. And if we have them in our field, then we probably are being manipulated or pressed into service to them because that's what parasites do. So, parasite comes into you and it really wants those french fries and that sugar and that bun that that burger comes on. It really wants the things that turn into sugar. It's got a ravenous appetite for it, and you're busy during the day and you're thinking you're keeping up with your diet, and then you go to sleep at night and something wakes you up and says, we need a cigarette. We need, we need the environment that will create the strongest response because we live off the ecology of acid and negative. We don't live off of sunshine and green leaves. Those are there are two varying. There's acid, there's alkalinity. We live off of the environment. So you create an internal ecology that supports. It's like the idea of you can go to a swamp or you can go to the park. They're two different environments. So it's self perpetuating. So the thing that is requiring the energy and wants you to smoke the cigarette, drink the alcohol, eat the sugar, get the red pop, get that, get that thing that's already dead and can putrefy in your colon, because that's the environment, that's the ecology we thrive in. And we can produce a whole lot more if you do that. That wakes you up when you are unconscious and unaware and not on your game. It's like there's some ice cream in the kitchen. I saw it in the refrigerator. Like, I'm sure it's in there. Go see. Go see if there's some cookies and ice cream in there. Maybe there's some leftover something, something we like. And so when that happens, you know that you're being directed
Mm.
because sleep is not the time for eating.
Yeah, so these are telltale signs of being influenced When I think this is an excellent example. It feels universal, and I'm sure people are listening to this like, "Oh man, she talking about me? She talking?" And I get it, and I've had moments like that, And but it is these understandings of seeing the pattern behavior and how it's always like that, when you think you're good and out of nowhere, out of the blue, the impulse to do something that would sabotage. And that's when you take your, you know what? Shut up. Parasites, take your tincture, take this. How about, or whatever herbs. I got something for you. But could you
That's
shift
something
gears?
that
'Cause
parasite purge for you.
oh, it's funny every time, and this. I was like, when you talk about parasites, I go right to the cabinet, and I just in conversation, I started looking over where's my tincture when you were talking because it's a thing. But would you speak about the necessity of purification because you were speaking so succinctly about how we are creating an environment for them to thrive,
Yes.
and it sounds like we need to do the opposite. What are ways or conditions, whether it's spiritually, uh, in our biology, or even, which I like this additional layer that you've added, which I don't hear people often speak about, which is the parasitic experiences that we have with everyday people or systems and constructs and ideas that siphon off of our energy and our life force. What uh, would you speak about this from the solution of creating a new environment that does not sustain parasitism?
Well, it's interesting because it is the model for the third dimension. It is the model is to feed off of things until they die. You know,
Yeah, capitalism.
well, in every possible way, work the worker until the worker is ready, cannot work anymore, give them a watch and let them retire and die.
Yeah.
It's that with a parasite in your body, often the parasite will devour the host until the host is dead, and then it'll leave looking for another host. But in many cases, the parasite will end itself as it ends you because its direction is to continue to devour,
Mm,
even to its own detriment. But not every parasite operates that way.
that's wild.
So when we look at it in the macro, look at it in the micro, and we can see it in our animals. Then they pick up parasites, what happens to them, how they're not themselves, how it makes them sick, how they're supporting another life form. And it might be 2 or 3 pounds of parasites in a person or an animal that grow and continue to grow if you continue the behavior that continues to sustain them, which often is the dietary um, sugars, is often what they're looking for, whether it's alcohol, but it's also in other ways as well because there are many levels.
If you're a conscious investor looking to make a difference, you need to hear about Aluka Gold. Because doing good and doing well isn't just a dream, it's our promise. Let's face it, everyone wants their money to work harder. But what if your gold investment could do double duty? Aluka Gold is more than just precious metal. We're committed to ethical sourcing and total transparency so you know exactly where your gold comes from and who it helps. Every ounce you invest helps support real miners and their communities with humanitarian projects and fair wages. That's not just good business, it's good for the world. You get solid, physical gold, plus the pride of knowing your investment brings hope and opportunity to families who need it most. So why settle for ordinary returns when you can spark extraordinary change? Invest with purpose. Invest with Aluka Gold. Do good, do well, and let your gold investment shine brighter than ever.
Quick question for you while we're speaking about that, because we get a lot of people who want to still incorporate sugar. When somebody's looking to remove parasites from them, should they just completely stop sugar, or should they change the type of sugar that they're getting? What would you recommend for somebody who's
And
going
if
through
you have physical intestinal parasites, and this helps with the spiritual, mental, and the day to day as well, I would encourage people to eat ferments, drink pickle juice, eat fermented foods, which then help you move parasites out of the experience because the microbiome has billions of let's call them light soldiers Yeah, the light soldiers march in and they put order in that colon. They put order in that big, larger intestine. They put order in. And when you eat them, they're sour. They are the opposite of what they're looking for. The parasite were looking for sweet. The ferments are sour. So the parasites don't want that. They are um, destroyed from that chemical composition. And then there's, depending on how often and how you do it, there may be a die off where you don't feel well while they leave the body because you may have many pounds of them.
I like to
And
speak on that. That the die-off factor, it's been something that's very noticeable where it's like, oh my gosh, my energy's low, and then next thing you know, it's like the this has been personal experience where there's like a annoyance because your energy and your life force is literally dropped because you got toxins flowing all through you. What I still want to complete the question, but I feel like every time you say something, it's like, ah, all right, let's just explore this, let's explore that. You know, the die off is a major thing because I think that most people would think that, okay, let me just take these tinctures. What can they do about the die off?
so if we go back to the idea of the microbiome and eating the ferments or drinking the fermented pickle juice, or some people use apple cider vinegar um, that's fermented. The idea of the ferment is it is the natural enemy of the overgrowth of the sugar. It's the sour. You know, in Ayurveda healing, we know that you have to have not only sweet and salty, you have to have sour and hot. And sour and hot help you with the things that love sweet and salty. So, you know, when you change the biology, when you change what you're putting in the body will start to change back to its original intelligence that has been hijacked by the food that we eat in natural settings and in indigenous cultures. People, you know, now they have white sugar, but that didn't exist that way before. Cane sugar is different than white processed sugar. So the biggest one of the biggest detriments is anything processed. Any aisle in the grocery store other than produce is processed. So you can have a bit of that, but all of that is processed food. And what has been done to it is an atrocity that, you know, would take too long to go into in this
Yeah.
reality. But all of that puts into you this mechanism that is devouring your life force and eating up all of your vitamins, minerals, and all your food. You eat it, it gets its part, and then we see what's left over for you. You know, like, so if you're eating starch and sugar or things that are starchy that turn into sugar in an environment where there isn't a balance, you know, where there's not a balance of fresh, live, organic creation food, not what man made, but what creation gave us without um, being tampered with.
I want to speak on that, but then bounce back and then launch us into a different direction. So I love that you're saying balance because I can see where if remember we were listening to someone speak about how people eat so-called soul food, but they omit the aspect of the herbs and things that were cleaning parasites and removing toxins from their bodies. So there was some level of balance in the diet where like people are just all the way left, you know, where there is no consideration of the necessity to cleanse regularly, to give the body a break, to flush out whatever levels of detoxing, again, to sustain some level of balance, just due to the context of the world we're in. Like you say, produce is the smallest section in the store. And then you have aisles upon aisles of so-called food or processed food, have a hyper processed food. And that was a thought that came up because we
Before
eat
you
all
go there,
those.
may I comment on what you just said about the people eat sushi. The people who invented sushi, who invented eating raw fish, know they're full of parasites. So on every plate, there's wasabi, which is horseradish, and there are other things usually to subdue the parasites from the that they have just ingested in the raw fish, because of course the waters of our world are inundated with chemicals and toxins. And even in the previous generations, there was always parasites in the fish. The people whose cultures know about that are eating a parasite purge while they're eating the fish to offset that. So when you talk about soul food, that is the same thing. The intelligence of the indigenous and the intelligence of the people who are connected to the food know how to offset whatever is available to them. And that has always been true. And then, but there is a balance in the communication. So it's not like it may look like people are just shoveling food on a plate in a soul food kitchen, but they might put those bitter greens in there with something that is only available to them that's not even food, like cornbread, and then the bitter greens to help offset the fact that the corn is not really for food for humans and not really digestible, and less so now than it was 100 years ago.
So a really good point. Hearing you speak about the bitter greens is making me go back to the ferments, which is just like the launch back that I wanted to do. But this idea that our palates aren't as diverse as they could be. We're
Yes.
not having a diversified experience. And you briefly mentioned Ayurveda, and it's they got a little of pretty much everything for your palate. But I can see how the bitters are so important. But back to the sour with the fermentation, it seems like based off of what you were sharing, uh, one of the major key solutions would be to introduce fermented or cultured foods into our diets as something regular. And then the direction I wanted us to catapult was you were kind of alluding there about how when you introduce the fermentation to the body, it changes the body's ecology, it changes your brain function. And so I can see where in the macro, where people are having parasitic experiences, maybe people who they have attached to them, or their allegiance to certain systems and ideas that are parasitic, where they would think differently and maybe reconsider because of the change of the body's ecology. Would you speak a little bit about how it translates into the larger scheme of reality?
It's so on point because when you put the brain, there's a brain in the solar plexus in the itself. There's a brain, there's intelligence there. In that, if that brain is run correctly, if the stomach is not exhausted, not worn out, if it is nourished appropriately, and then it is given the variety of hot, bitter, spicy, all of the different things, it then has information to inform the brain to release the hormones, which then make the person more balanced and not delusional because all of it is everything is connected. So if you're letting the parasites run your body, they're probably running your mind.
Mm. That sounds creepy. I'm sure people listen is like, whoa.
So and it's really that it's really that true, that the idea of filling the or adding into your diet the fermented food. And I'd like to just say what that is. We were not, this world was not created with refrigerators. I know that's shocking.
Because that's all people know. They could.
Yes, that's what people here know, but I have lived in countries that are emerging countries that are not first world. And it is known in those places that if you want to enhance an item, that you let it ferment. So you want your onions or your garlic to be better, you put it in a jar on the counter for 4 or 5 days, then you eat it, and it enhances its ability to be an antibiotic. It enhances its ability to heal you. It has greater capacity. So we're just saying ferment. If you want to take your food to another level, you can only do this with organic food. You take this, to with food, you can't take a processed item and ferment it.
Yeah.
You can't take a frozen burrito and try to ferment it. But you can you could take some parsley or you could take a peach or any of those other things. And if you were to do that, you would have bumped up the amount of bacteria that is in favor of human digestion. to such an extent that it will improve your outcomes when you ingest it. And I want to mention here something that I learned a long time ago, but I've never seen it written anywhere, but it stands true in its clarity. Is that I did live in Europe for a while, and there were many catacombs where priests and monks were making beer, and people are really beer lovers in those places all through Germany and the Netherlands and all that. But even in the Bible, and I'm certainly not a scholar, but I do remember Jesus did turn some water into wine. I know why, because the water was toxic, and fermentation cleans that up and protects the recipient of what is the next product. So you ferment some grapes, you ferment peaches, and then it turns into a fermented drink that you can then drink, that makes it more safe than the water that people are defecating in and the animals are bathing in. So this is the reality of how the world, well, how we manage to still have humans on the planet, is that fermentation is a superpower. It not only increases and improves the vitality by inviting in the billions of microorganisms that we don't like the way it smells. We have kind of aversion to it, but those microorganisms decrease your appetite for sugar, start cleaning up the gut, start sending the correct messages to the brain for your estrogen and your testosterone, and they start making the brain function where what you think you believe you realize is a lie, and you're not operating the truth, because it's all connected.
I want to
It's
speak to
all one
that
thing, one system.
just briefly, because you were saying how when people smell fermentation, they don't like it. And in my mind, I'm like, that's those parasites. Those parasites don't like it. But then you mentioned earlier, you alluded to how when you start changing the body's ecology, your cravings are different.
Yes.
And what we have seen with many clients, when they begin to introduce cultured or fermented foods into their diet, they crave it. It's like, oh, I want, and they enjoy the smell of the fermentation rather than being off put by it.
Well, the initial, what I have noticed, and this may not be 100%, what I have noticed is that it depends on your toxic load.
Yeah.
It depends on what level of toxicity are we talking about, as to what kind of revulsion you will have towards the other end of the spectrum. So it may be that you just need to add a little bit at a time. I have also noticed that children who won't eat anything, their little bodies will sometimes eat the ferments or the pickles or the pickle juice, things that are lightly fermented and appropriate. They will eat those things because the biology itself wants them, even though they may not want anything green. But there is this idea that if you start them off with it, they'll end up with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, we've I think gone about a good half hour.
Oh,
I would love to continue this, but I think that this is one of those topics where we have really laid a thorough foundation and we have expanded into so many different ideas. This feels like such a solid podcast. And also, for those that are listening, comment below. Like, did you resonate with this? What did you gain from this? Is this shift your perspective on uh, entities and all their many forms, specifically parasitic entities? And then did this inspire you to change? Did this inspire you to go get a tincture or some herbs and some bitters or some probiotic, some I keep saying microbiome, some cultured vegetables, some fermented vegetables to shift that body ecology. So, any final thoughts before we go? I'm going to do a card pull for the truth that we need to hear.
I think this is a good place to begin that is often overlooked. Often people speak of spiritual matters as if they are not physical as well. But parasites are multidimensional experiences that can be addressed in a multidimensional way. So there's more.
All right, this is a cool one. The card pull is universal laws as the theme. It is purple for the crown chakra. The maxim reads, operating in higher frequencies requires adherence to universal laws.
Yes. So there you have it. And I think this would be good to talk about another time. So maybe we'll go back and do this again. We thank everyone for joining us, and we leave you now with the greetings of Invocation Veritas with honor, respect, and gratitude. Thank you.